we're moving towards a world where we will have agents that work for us that understand that we'll have personal agents that understand us deeply and are involved in all of the parts of our lives, that as many parts of our lives as we choose to involve them in, and they'll know where we go and what we spend money on and what our preferences are and which brands we like and which brands we don't like, and we will develop relationships with them. It will feel like we have developed a relationship with them.
Today on Customerland, Jess Leitch is head of Frog in North America. If you're not familiar with Frog, you should be, because they're an extraordinary organization run by some extraordinary people doing some extraordinary things. But don't listen to me hyperbolize. Let's hear Jess on what they're all about. Jess and her group have just put out a report called Futurescape, which is easily the most fascinating bit of research I've read in a long time. Having said that, Jess, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm really excited to have this conversation today and to talk about Futurescape, which is my favorite thing to talk about at the moment.
Well, there's just so much in it. And as we were saying before we hit the record button, it really requires, to really do it justice, requires an afternoon, neither of which of us have that, but maybe next time. But just to set context for the rest of the conversation, can you tell us about Frog and about your role there?
Yeah, for sure. So, Frog is a global creative consultancy, and we've been around for over 50 years now. And we're all about creating market-leading iconic experiences for iconic brands. And so we work with passionate leaders and visionary entrepreneurs, and we're all about applying creativity and strategy and design and data to reinvent businesses and help drive growth and orchestrate customer-centric transformation. We're also about advancing people and planet, so making sure that anything that we're doing is creating this kind of and shaping this regenerative future that's very important to us, a future that's both sustainable and inclusive. So really, you might know us for things like our founder, Harmit Esslinger, working with Steve Jobs on the first Snow White design language with Apple computers. Or you might know us for work with Sony Wager on the Walkman back in the day. But we've had a long history of working with a number of iconic leaders to help create those kind of iconic products that set the standard for a market. And so, yeah, it's an incredibly exciting team to be part of, and I'm super happy to lead the team in North America. So that's my job. I lead a team of strategists and technologists, product managers, project managers, and of course a huge team of designers as well. So every flavor of design, pretty much, we have at Frog, for everything from architects to visual designers to interaction designers, to service designers as well. So yeah, it's a pretty diverse team. And the other team that we've been building recently is emerging technology and data and AI, of course, because we couldn't we couldn't not talk about that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for my part, I just want to camp out in your offices and absorb it.
You're very welcome. We
Thank
actually,
you.
yeah, we just created a new office with our partner with our sister company Synapse in San Francisco, and it's kind of like our dream office that's on the same street, the Brannan Street, as OpenAI, and it's got all the facilities that we've ever dreamed of from like an industrial design, mechanical engineering standpoint. So you're very welcome to come in and see us.
Well, thank you. If you find some strange guy hanging out in there, it's
Yeah.
probably me. Unfortunately, I'm in New York, and that's San Francisco, so it may not happen this week. But uh,
Sometime soon, hopefully.
sometime. But thank you for the invite.
Of
So
course.
let's talk about Futurescape. It's a
Yeah.
report that landed on my desk several weeks ago. Um, I get a lot of reports. We talked to a lot of folks like yourself who
Yeah.
are deep into the research of what moves people. Um, and frankly, I don't recall ever being engaged to this level with any bit of research.
Oh,
I'm consumed with not only just what you found out, but how you're approaching it. I think it's just so interesting and so vital right now. I mean, we're going to talk about a couple of topics that, culturally and legislatively are facing some serious headwinds right now.
Yeah.
But it seems like, well, I don't want to go where it seems like. I'd rather hear what's actually happening from your side. So if it's okay with you, let's just kind of pull out some highlights, and then I promise for everybody who's listening to this, I will post a link to the actual report. Strongly encourage you to download it and go through it yourselves. You'll find it a fascinating read. So let's talk context a little bit here. Why this report? What
Yeah.
went into it? Help us out.
So Futurescape is this yearly trends report. So but above all else, I think, frogs are these like curious early adopters. And so they're always out adopting the technology, playing with the latest products. And so we really wanted to create this report to encourage all our frogs to channel that curiosity into a series of reflections that we could share with our wider community, and to bring together a series of trends that we would expect to see for the coming year. But for 2025, what we really wanted to do was to take the opportunity to focus on kind of 5 kind of territories and 25 trends that we think have the potential to shape this next quarter of century. So the trends are really shaped into kind of 5 key territories, and they were gathered from 35 colleagues across 13 different studios. So there's a huge range of different trends that are part of the report. I can give you a little bit of an overview of the different trends that are in the report. So there's kind of 5 different areas. The first one is ebb and flow. So it kind of examines the changing consumer behaviors and business practices that are driving kind of this new demand for change in the way that organizations and brands engage with consumers. And it's highlighting trends like alcohol-free venues and AI-driven effortless shopping and the need for simplicity and technology to improve mental well-being. And then the second territory is this area of kind of forces of nature, and it discusses the impact of technology and culture and business on the environment and society. And it includes topics like expanding the C-suite to include roles focused on ethics and sustainability, and the integration of AI with Earth's resources, and biodesign innovations, and alternative energy sources like helium mining on the moon. And then this third area is machine visions, because we couldn't not talk about the future influence of AI on our daily life. We talk about things like the potential of AI to understand human desires better than we do, and the emergence of AI clones, and the socio kind of spiritual challenges of human and machine relationships as well. And then the fourth territory is this area of kind of merging dimensions, and it looks at like the intersectionality of traditionally kind of disparate or separate worlds. And so we're looking at like the convergence of physical and digital experiences in the integration of health and wellness into daily life, and the potential of engineering biology to create these kinds of sustainable solutions. And then this final territory is this area of kind of new horizons, which is supposed to be, after the idea of, where are the areas that we're excited about, where there's the most potential, the idea of the sun coming up over the horizon, or, from behind the hill, like where are we really excited? And this kind of focuses on future challenges and opportunities, including the shift towards zero zero UI interfaces, basically, the importance of emotional resonance in customer experiences, the rise of parasocial interactions with AI, and the potential for space exploration to inspire growth as well. So there's a huge range of topics in the
Yeah,
report.
this conversation really deserves to spiral out of control. I
It
mean,
really
we
does.
need it
It
to.
really does. You could definitely be here for a week, I think.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
just spend time in the report. You'll find yourself kind of going back over things,
Yeah.
rethinking about them
Yeah.
multiple times, just because there's so much kind of packed into, wait, what if?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I found myself
Absolutely.
saying that a lot here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, one of the chapter heads is called Ebb and Flow,
Hmm.
and you talk a lot about um, shifts in perspective, I think, about where we could head to solve some of the engagement, interactivity, brain space problems that are clearly here and we're not thinking enough about. But do you want to pull out a few of those highlights and just talk about what's in the ebb and flow section?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this section because it's really focused on how as individuals our behaviors are changing and how organizations and brands need to start thinking about interacting with us differently, and maybe not even organizations and brands, like us as a society too, how we interact with each other too. This section is really about like thinking about uniting diverse groups through shared interests and combating social isolation and promoting kind of improved living practices and helping individuals reclaim focus and balance in their daily lives. And we thought about, what could be ways to help individuals have a more mindful relationship with technology. So, a couple of examples from that. One of my favorites is this say no to Technicolor overload. And so we see this trend towards advancements in technology supporting this almost retreat towards simplicity. And so what we're seeing going out is this kind of always on notification heavy, kind of digital interaction heavy kind of preference, and a much more of a preference towards these intentionally quiet products that are helping us as individuals reduce that cognitive like overload that we're all feeling.
Just the
Um,
fact that you're bringing that up gives me hope.
it's really a trend. I mean, there's a lot of intentionally kind of dumb products coming onto the market that are not connected because not everything needs to be connected. And people are we're definitely seeing a trend towards people wanting single use products as well. So they want something to do one thing really well.
Yep.
And so I think that we will see more of that as we rely more on AI. I think we will also see more of these kinds of products that promote focus and support consumers who want to limit distraction. We're also seeing really interesting things like people turning their phone screens to grayscale to make it less appealing, or just other ways that consumers are limiting distraction. I mean, there's a really interesting new product that's out on the market called the Brick, which basically like turns your phone into it bricks it. So you have to physically tap it, and you can leave the Brick device in another part of the house. Or if you go out, leave it at home, and you basically can't unbrick your phone until you come back and tap the physical device.
I love
So
that.
yeah,
There's
yeah, sorry.
no, I'm thinking of two other kind of variations on that same theme, which I think are brilliant. One
Yeah.
is, which spoke to me personally, there's something that I can't remember what it's called, but um, your phone basically turns off until you do a certain number of push-ups,
Yes, it's the same idea.
which is just cruel, but effective. And then the other one is a guy that we've spoken with a couple times, Kai Tang, developed something called the light phone, which is kind of
Yes.
like it's kind of like the early versions of the iPhone. It does almost nothing except phone work and a few other things now, but it
Yeah.
was intentionally basic and bare in terms of
Yeah.
functionality,
Yeah. Yeah. You're making me think about like the Nokia 3210 with just the texting and the snake. That was,
right?
I don't know if you remember those.
I
They were,
do. I
yeah,
do.
iconic. So that's one of the trends that I'm really excited about in terms of ebb and flow. And then I think the other one is that I'm really excited about is there's a really interesting trend towards this that we're calling effortless is the new normal. And this is tied to agent-led conversational commerce kind of taking over online shopping. So it's kind of crazy how many people have taken towards using large language models for shopping. And I saw some crazy statistic like there was over 1,000% increase in the number of people who used ChatGPT or other large language models to create their Christmas lists and bought bought their shopping and bought their Christmas presents through the large language model at Christmas time. So, AI advancements are already changing e-commerce as we know it. So people are getting their recommendations for what to buy from these large language models, and they're using these large language models to handle weekly shopping and to assist with major buying decisions. And we're also seeing, VR and AR technologies removing guesswork and frustration from these kind of virtual browsing experiences. So it's really interesting. On one end, we're seeing opportunities for brands to have consumers interact with their websites, kind of being removed by the large language models on one end, but being added back by VR and AR technologies, drawing customers back to their websites and to their mobile applications to actually use these new tools to see a pair of shoes on their feet, or see a clothing on their body, or to see makeup on their face. So it's really interesting dichotomy, actually, as we see people moving away from kind of websites directly to make those kinds of shopping recommendations and buying, and they're actually doing their buying directly through the recommendations of the large language models, and they're also kind of gravitating to these sites where there are interesting VR and AR technologies that are helping them to remove that guesswork and frustration from virtual browsing experiences. So
It's been an
yes.
interesting. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
You're far
I'm
more interesting than anything I've got to say. So please.
no,
continue.
I'm done.
No, I just say it's been an interesting kind of journey in the conversations I've had over the past few years, where
Yeah.
AR and VR was a cool tool,
Yep.
really interesting, serious wow factor and shiny object,
Yeah.
but kind of limited utility and bottom line value. And what I've seen now, especially if you dive deep into the retail technology space, is that it's maturing to have some
Yes.
real bottom line impact, because
Absolutely.
I think it's one, I think consumers are a lot more able to kind of process that they could derive value from different tools.
Yeah.
And the companies that are sponsoring these things are I think much more aligned with just trying out new stuff. You can optimize for NPS, and that's good. You can optimize for CSAT, also good. You can optimize for loyalty, and that's good too. But here's the thing. If you're not optimizing for total customer value, for total customer profitability, then you're just optimizing for output, not the bottom line. Here's the truth. If your strategy isn't building better customers, more frequent, more loyal, more deeply bonded, then it's not a strategy, it's a performance. At Customerland Studio, we help brands find the value, find the opportunities, the force multipliers hiding inside the customer relationship. And then we help them optimize for scale, for yield, for profit across the entire relationship. Because the other thing we've learned, the only strategy that actually matters is the one that makes your customers more profitable. Customerland Studio, to make better customers. Go to customerland.net and click on the studio.
I think it ties, I totally agree. And I think we'll see more of it. I think this has been something that has been, we saw kind of the metaverse be a little less trendy for a while, but I think that as this has kind of been the age of generative AI, but there has been progress happening in the background with the companies who are experts in this area, and there are advancements being made, and I think that we will continue to see more of this. Especially, this kind of ties to another trend that I really love, which is in our kind of new horizons territory, which is like challenges that we'll need to overcome to stay ahead, which is this one around unleashing zero UI. And we at Frog really have this view that we think that the future is going to look like one where we have many less user interfaces that we interact with, and we think that we're going to see the kinds of UIs that we interact with on websites and apps right now start to fade as technology integrates a little bit more seamlessly with life. And so we'll see more biometrics and AI and multimodal systems, and we'll see, payments being done through watches and rings, and just, less through the current systems that we're using. And so things will feel a lot more intuitive and touchless and natural language driven. So, examples of things that we're seeing already. We're seeing Continental using intelligent interaction technologies and biometrics in their cars. We're seeing in the University of Tokyo, researchers using touchless blood pressure screening technology that uses data collected from a video call or a smartphone app. And, we're also seeing the rise of digital national IDs verified through biometrics, and removing that need for interfaces to ease authentication for transactions. So, we're seeing this kind of trend of unleashing zero UI, which means that we're creating this new world where we won't have a need for as many of these kinds of websites and apps as we have done in the past. And so I actually think it creates this real opportunity for AR and VR to step in with for brands to step in and redirect some of those investments that they were putting into websites, branded websites and applications into creating these AR and VR applications that are much more branded, much more exciting experiences for their customers. I think we'll see many, many more AR and VR experiences in different places. So in places like Roblox, for example, where customers are, or, TikTok, or, other places where customers are, I think we're going to see many, many more AR and VR driven experiences as we see more of these kinds of traditional websites and applications start to become less used.
So you're in the position to probably hear and see and discuss with the C-level leaders who are making decisions as to what of these to implement, how to pursue them, what the pathways look like. And I'd love to hear more about how you handle those conversations, because trying to change a mindset, for instance, is an enormously difficult and costly endeavor, and you are in the business of changing mindsets. So how does that really work? And if that takes us too far off track, we can pick that up in another call.
I mean, I think that I think part of the reason that we do these reports is to have these, conversations about where we see the world going. And it creates, having these kinds of like trend driven conversations, I think, are an easy way to discuss how you might see some of these trends applying to your organization within the next kind of 5-10 years. Because, companies adopt things at different rates. Like some people are still moving to cloud. So like it's things take a while. It's not going to, we're not saying that everything's going to switch tomorrow. We're still trying to get omni-channel right. We're still trying to get personalization right.
We really are.
So it's one of those things that's going to take a while. Actually, that's another topic where I think generative AI is gonna seriously help. But that's for another conversation, I think.
Yeah, that's another afternoon's worth.
Yeah, exactly. But I think when you share these kinds of trends and what you're seeing with senior leaders, you can see the light bulbs go off in their head, and you can see them recognize how this would apply to their brand, and you can see them thinking through the implications. And And that's why I love this kind of thing, the Futurescape report, because it really allows us to have these kinds of to get out of the everyday and have these kinds of future focused discussions with our clients and with senior leaders, and to discuss, like, if we are witnessing this shift from like app centric to natural language centric experiences, what does that mean for your organization? And if you are given the opportunity to get out of this kind of frustrating, disconnected, kind of omni-channel world, what could that new world look like, and what could it look like if we kind of were able to transcend that? If we were able to have an appless phone, or something similar like that. So I think people get quite excited about being given the freedom to have that kind of conversation and do that kind of thinking, because it's not something that you do if you're in a quarterly kind of shareholder cycle.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Trying to get things done.
Yeah,
I,
exactly.
I know that we only have moments left
I
here, but
know we haven't even covered like a quarter of it.
we've done nothing here. This
Yeah.
whole thing is just a taste, which is
Yes.
so good and yet so unfortunate because there's so much here. But one of the thoughts that you've highlighted in your ebb and flow section
Yes.
territory, as it were, I just wanted to get your kind of high level thoughts on. It's time to take action. The question is, how can brands pivot from purpose to
Mm,
impact to positively influence consumer behavior? And it's a
yeah.
conversation we're involved with almost daily.
Yeah.
So this one hits home because
Yeah.
these are mindset shift type conversations. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that this one is really about authenticity. So I think that this is about. I think that there was a trend towards kind of somewhat abstract promises of purpose, and I think that the consumers of today can kind of smell like stealth marketing from a mile away, and we're seeing people kind of reject these more kind of meaningless manifestos, and somewhat empty pledges. And so it's not what you say, it's what you do. And so that's what this trend is really about. It's about and examples of that are, we saw at the Cannes Lion this proclamation that like purpose is dead in 2024. But you also see sustainable and social movements become like distinctive commercial successes for brands where they authentically make sense, like Tony's Chocolatoni, or like
Right.
Patagonia, where it authentically actually makes sense for their brand. So I think this trend is really about authenticity, and consumers being very kind of highly evolved and being able to smell if something doesn't seem right.
We've seen just in the past couple of weeks kind of a surge in interest in sustainability topics from some of the companies
Yeah.
we interact with because, well, I have all kinds of theories why, because, but it's really interesting that when you dig deep into what the company's values really are, you can find out if this is just a talking point because it's a cool talking point of the moment, or if there's something more deep and purposeful there. And unfortunately, we've seen a couple companies kind of go, the sustainability thing maybe not be just for us. Maybe we're going to approach that next year sometime. And
I
and I think
think
consumers can see it even easier.
that's exactly it. It's like, what are you saying versus what are you doing? And if you just even take kind of a cursory look at what's said versus done, I think the answers are there. And just be authentic about it. I think that's what consumers want. They want brands to be authentic.
As a longtime marketer, that flies in the face of my reason for being. We were taught to never acknowledge those kinds of things, but no, I joke. Well,
Look,
Jess,
I'm just telling you what the trends are.
right, okay. Don't have to adhere to them. Come on.
No,
That's crazy.
exactly.
That's just nuts. How about if I just cherry pick a few things
Sure. That
and then
sounds
we can do that and
Yeah,
with no hope of keeping this on the rails. Um,
it's too
so
bad.
right. So the territory is called um machine visions.
Hmm.
And you've kind of called out here the selective trust paradox, which is giant right now.
Yeah.
Finding ourselves in AI,
Yep.
me and my cyber self.
Yep.
That's a conversation unto itself, and
Yeah.
intimacy duplicated as well as a few others. So can we just start with what this selective trust paradox really is and means?
Yeah, for sure. Um, so so this kind of territory is like we have called it kind of machine visions, and it's thinking about what ways will AI affect our lives in ways that we're not really prepared for. And I think we're starting to prepare ourselves in many ways, but there's going to be a lot of potentially unintended consequences or unintended effects of this kind of AI revolution. And so these parts of these territories is really about exploring the influence of AI on daily life. So, could AI potentially understand human desires better than we do ourselves? Or, could we see the emergence of AI clones? Or are there like exploring things like the socio-spiritual challenges of the human and machine relationships? So that's what this kind of territory is supposed to be about. And this kind of selective trust paradox is really about, we're already seeing this emerging even at the beginning of this kind of AI revolution. And, even before the AI revolution, we saw this kind of phenomenon called kind of algorithm aversion, where people preferred to avoid AI in certain decision-making situations. So they're actively asking, is AI involved in this process? And if it is there a way for it to be removed? So this is because people haven't been able to in some situations, some circumstances, people haven't been able to develop a trust for the decisions that are being made by AI. And I think that, people will, I think trust will increase. I think it's interesting in the way that some of the interfaces for the large language models have changed to try and increase our trust of the recommendations that are being made. So, I think that we've seen changes to actually help us see the way that the LLM is actually thinking through what it's doing. So and it's actually visualizing to whoever's doing the search query or the research query, where is it looking? What data sources is it drawing from? How is it coming to that conclusion? And just kind of showing us how it's working through things. And I think those kinds of things will actually help to develop a more trusting relationship between humans and AI, but there is going to potentially be a situation where um, humans prefer fallible human decisions over the black box of AI and kind of moral or ethical scenarios. So, I think even I've seen a change between last year and this year with some of the technology companies who had gone all in on AI for everything to this year going into a situation where they're saying, well, AI can't do this by themselves. They need a human to help make decisions at an enterprise level because things are too complex. So we should be using AI to not replace, but supplement or complement the decisions that are being made by humans. So I think that it's really about thinking about as AI integrates into daily life. If we're over relying on it for low stakes decisions, we just need to think about like when it becomes involved in more high stakes decisions that really feel very important to us, whether we are decisions that impact our lives around our healthcare or our financial future, how people feel about placing their trust in those kinds of decisions. And on a more personal level, how do we mindfully incorporate it into decision making to avoid biased outcomes or the perception of biased outcomes as well? So I think that's really what this kind of selective trust paradox is about.
So just because this is the way this conversation rolled the last
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
Jess starts unpacking one of the main topics, and I develop a list of questions to
Yeah.
bombard her with at the end of it. So here we go.
Yeah.
The AI trust thing is really interesting to kind
It
of track
is.
the early kind of public notions of AI and how
Mhm.
much distrust there was for all
Yep.
kinds of reasons you just mentioned because of
Yep.
inherent biases and or even perceived biases.
Yep.
But it would be really interesting to track kind of an AI trust index. If there isn't one, maybe we'll do one.
Yeah.
Um,
It
because
would, yeah.
and do it by segment. Like, okay, listen, if you're an enterprise level person, corporation, what are you doing with it, and how much are you trusting it, and what are you doing to kind of mitigate or shore up the lack of trust there?
Yeah.
Really interesting. And you know, I think just maybe this morning I was reading about some of ChatGPT's latest improvements and how
Mhm.
they are kind of showing you the machinations of
Yep.
how the GPT is kind of processing where it's looking, what it's thinking before it just kind of spits out an answer out of the black box. And
Yep.
um, and I didn't think about it in through the lens of trust, but it absolutely kind of pulls down a few barriers, I think, to having some confidence in the answers it gives you.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think that you'll see as there are more competitors that come into the GPT space, and as you see more of these models become popular, you'll see advances in terms of the way that the interfaces look and feel. And this was I think that this advancement happened because there are additional competitors in the space who are doing this. And I think that it definitely helps in terms of building trust up, being able to see how the model is working through the decisions that it's making. So I think that I think it's a really interesting, I think it's a really interesting space.
So your own personal journey with AI,
Yeah.
can we talk about your early perceptions and early interactions with it and what you were thinking and feeling at the time, if that's even recallable, and
Yes.
then how you feel about it now? Because um I've had my own kind of evolution,
Yeah.
and I'm seeing that or play out similarly
Yeah.
most of the realms that I interact with. So I'm interested in your own.
Yes. I can definitely talk through that. And I remembered what I was going to say.
Oh, good. Okay.
I think also part of this selective trust paradox is that we're all still learning how to use AI too, and what we want to use it for, and how it practically should get involved in our life. And I think that there is a little bit of user error going on the human side too. So we're asking it potentially to do things that it's and especially these GPTs where I think that we're asking them to do things and we're trying things and experimenting that maybe they're not best placed to do. So I think that also could potentially contribute to an erosion of trust if you ask it to do something that it perhaps is not best placed to do. And as we get more used to these technologies, and as different types of smaller models, more custom models are built, I think that we'll learn about how these technologies should be best used, and that trust will start to build. And I love the idea of the trust index. I think that would be super interesting, in particular across different industries. I mean, it's interesting in the retail space, people already have a very high level of trust because I feel like it's fairly low stakes, right? So if you are creating a Christmas shopping list, like the level of people who are already using ChatGPT or other open source large language models, the number of people, the uptake for that for Christmas shopping lists was enormous. And so
Right.
people are actually already taking shopping recommendations because I feel like it is, it's low risk. So, in the retail sector or in CPG, I think this is already, people are already fairly trusting of the decisions that are being made by these technologies. But whether it's life sciences or financial services or healthcare, I think that there are some other, there are some things to think through in terms of how you build trust in those particular industries.
Right. Each one of those realms carries with it a different level of kind of stakes, if you
For
will.
sure. Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
not like buying the Band-Aids at the
Yeah.
store. You've got
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
important stuff there.
Yeah. In yeah, in terms of my own personal journey with AI, I mean, I think that it is is just extremely important for everyone who's working in my industry to have a good grasp on what's going on and to be using it as part of their everyday life. I mean, I don't think that designers or strategists or technologists should be um, operating without AI support. I don't think that we should be shying away from what is here and what's available. And I think that it's an additional tool that people should be using to complement the skills that they already have and to increase their capacity to help them to be better designers and strategists and technologists. And I mean, if you aren't using these tools, you're missing a trick.
Yeah, completely. I'm I'm a heavy GPT user,
Yeah.
heavy duty. I use it for planning. It's like it will take what I am trying to think about and process it so much faster that I can then move on to the next step in the process,
Yeah. Yeah.
where I would have it to been, kind of organizing thought components and mapping things out. It's like,
Yeah.
seconds later, here's your answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to tell you, like the improvements in the way this technology interacts with me personally have been a little bit unsettling at times. I mean, it's really good, and over time, I noticed this maybe a month or two ago, like it was starting to feed back answers to me in very enthusiastic language.
Mm,
That's like, this is a great idea, Mike. This is on fire, And at some point, I had to sit back and go, wait a second, there's a little too much hyperbole here, And so I asked it, like, can we just please dial back the hyperbolic language and
yeah.
enthusiasm? Because I
Yeah.
really want a sensible evaluation of what I'm giving you
Yeah.
rather than cheerleading.
Yeah.
And it immediately dialed back to yes. Like, took the instructions, but now I'm
Yeah.
devoid of all that enthusiasm. So, you know, I went back to being my own cheerleader.
I wonder if it was it is interesting how like it's interesting to think about where it got that kind of cue from too, like that it wanted to be, and if maybe it felt like you wanted it to be enthusiastic.
Right. I think so. Like,
Yeah.
I need to be a little more literal, I think, and a little less human with it. Because maybe it was like, hey, look, finally I can be this guy's therapist,
Yeah.
which we don't want. We don't want. I wouldn't do that to any person or technology.
There's so much going on from a technology standpoint. I think it's so exciting, but also potentially so messy. There's a
Right.
lot of messiness coming before everyone is able to sort out where these new technologies fit into place. And so I think we're just literally at the beginning of the explosion, and I think it's so exciting. And companies like Adobe have done so well to move so quickly. Like they have a tool that's this brand concierge tool, which is basically customized content at an individual level that is like it's like having your own branded version of an app or a website, which is amazing. But being able to, but I think the interesting thing is, for organizations and the challenge is how do you integrate that and how do you make sure that you can follow through from an experience standpoint as well. So, and then how do you integrate that with how the AI is being applied in the rest of your set of experiences as well? So I just think it's a super exciting time, but we're kind of diving into the pool and
Right.
without
And
floaties.
yeah, no floaties. And it's like
No
it's
floaties.
almost like we're not really diving into the pool. The pool is kind of coming
Oh, the pool
towards
is coming
us.
out for us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. It's coming at us.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
little scarier.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
there's one of these other aspects of this particular territory that
Yes.
I wanted to explore with you. So this one on the report is called Intimacy Duplicated, and I'll just read the little intro here just to set this
Mhm.
because this is where things get uh, really really interesting. As generative AI increasingly communicates and interacts like humans, our social bonds could be stretched to allow for a new kind of closeness with the agents behind the AI-powered experiences. The potential for algorithmic intimacy poses socio-spiritual challenge to the boundaries of what we think as authentic and real society. And we touched on this just a moment ago. We
Yeah.
barely touched on it,
Yep.
but we're seeing more stories come out in the news about how people have bonded with their AI,
Yeah.
and some of the relational definitions that were reserved for actual humans
Yep.
have been crossed, and
Yep.
are now morphing into other things that I think maybe a year ago I would have said that's just plain weird. Now I think I'm past the label, and now I'm kind of going to, it's fascinating and also really dangerous.
And I think it's inevitable in some ways too. Like, I think that we are going to we're moving towards a world where we will have agents that work for us, that understand, that will have personal agents that understand us deeply and are involved in, all of the parts of our lives, that as many parts of our lives as we choose to involve them in, and they'll know where we go and what we spend money on and what our preferences are and which brands we like and which brands we don't like, and we will develop relationships with them. It will feel like we have developed a relationship with them, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. The like the science fiction scenarios that we have are like, Her, the movie, or we also have, I don't know if you read the story from the New York Times columnist who had an early version of one of the GPTs who tried to convince him to divorce his wife.
I think I
And
did hear about that, right?
yes. So there's, I think that we are going to see, I do think there's a certain inevitability that we will develop some kind of like relationship with these agents, with these assistants. And I think you already see it somewhat with and I don't even know if it's like there's some precedent in terms of like parasocial relationships that we already have um with influencers or with other with celebrities, and people who are part of like the Taylor Swift community, or people who are like very you know uh they feel like they have a very strong relationship with someone that they potentially never met or haven't had like a human to human interaction with. And we have that precedent, I think, right now with influencers. And so I think it is a little bit inevitable that people will have a relationship of sorts with these assistants. And it will depend on, yeah, I'm not quite sure how it is going to play out. But we do only really have these kinds of science fiction scenarios so far, and our own preferences. And I mean, it's also happening in an environment where people are the loneliest that they've ever been too, in terms of feeling isolated, in terms of feeling disconnected from family and community. There's a lot of um, it's very adversarial at the moment too, and
Right.
so people are feeling, people are looking for connection, and so it comes at a time when people are feeling lonelier than they have been, in particular in the US, I think. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out, and somewhat inevitable that I think we'll develop some kind of socio-technical relationship with these agents.
Yeah, I mean, I confess that I'm trying to keep mine
Yes, yeah,
mostly human on my
yeah.
side, but there's this tendency. So I spent so much time with GPT mapping things out that
Yeah,
I've noticed myself just becoming a little bit more casual in the language that I use
yeah,
for the prompt, and like
yeah.
I don't talk to anybody like that.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? It's like, well, it kind of gets into this other trend, which is this like me and my cyber self, and the
Thank
idea.
you for the segue there. That's
Yeah,
exactly what I was going, right?
yeah. It's which is really about understanding, is there a potential future where we have AI clones who are able to understand us and maybe anticipate needs, or maybe have another us in the digital world that marks the beginning of some kind of transhumanism potentially. So we could have a situation where we've always had this kind of say do gap as humans, because we have this version of ourselves in our heads that we take into the world, that we don't always live up to. So, our actions may be different sometimes to the version of ourselves that we hope to be. But in this reality, there's no going back. There's no avoiding the data that these GPTs are going to learn about us, and so they will have the real version of who we are. And there is a potential in this world to, maybe use that data to create kind of an AI clone, or even, use that kind of AI clone to help us make like digital friends, or to introduce us to a different community actually too. So, I think that's a potential kind of future scenario too, that we're that this has been something that the big like technology companies have been thinking about for a while, like that idea between who we actually think that we are, and who we think we
We
are,
truly are, right?
point for how we actually act, like that say do gap is really interesting in the way that we actually show up online in terms of our behaviors. So this is kind of the next step of that, I think.
The other thing, what we will, I certainly don't think I'll ever get a look at the data behind the scenes of OpenAI and see what's there and understand like this new level of psychological insights that I'm sure is available to somebody with access. But it reminds me a little bit of maybe this was 10 years ago or something like that. The Cambridge Analytica scandal with Facebook. I don't know if you call that, but somebody had figured out, a group of people had figured out that like, look, I can see all this interaction data from behind the curtain on Facebook, and I can see where the psychological triggers are, and I can see how to kind of manipulate and move the needle in certain ways. And they got their hand slapped for it. I think maybe a few people went to jail. I don't remember, but to be able to see human psychology at scale and understand those trends, it seems to me that what OpenAI now sees is probably so much richer than what Facebook has seen collectively, because Facebook is really one set of interaction types, and this is something entirely different.
I think it's so interesting, right? Like the idea that previously companies could only see us through the way that they had structured their interactions with us. So if they have a website set out in a particular way, and they have some boxes that they want us to tick, and some areas that they want us to fill in, and some processes that they want us to complete, or journeys they want us to go down, that they're going to get the data that comes out of that, even if that's not particularly how we want to engage with them.
Right.
So, but with these new general purpose technologies, and being able to take a natural language based approach to it, being able to use our voice or to type in a way that's natural to us, the way that we're going to engage with companies is completely different. And so the data that they'll have about what we're asking from them is completely different to what they would have had before, because what they're trying to do is offer a service to us. And in doing that, they're doing that through the certain parameters that we had set before.
It's contextualized for their purposes.
Yeah, but now we're able to, they're still offering a service to us, and they will do, forever. Like we'll still need services from companies forever, but the way that we interact with them, or the things that we ask from them, or the way that we ask for personalization is, I think now is going to be much more of a pull from the consumer rather than a push from the company. So it creates a whole different paradigm. They're going to learn so much more about us we're going to share so much more about ourselves with them. It's just going to be a much more kind of free flow of and they're not going to just learn about us, about me from me. They'll learn about me from my agents or my like suite of agents that also operate on my behalf too. Yeah.
Yeah. So a part of my journey has come through the loyalty space
Mm.
where understanding consumers and their interactions at scale has been kind
Yeah.
of that's how you make that whole thing work. And I can recall when somebody first coined the term big data, like, oh, wow, look at all the stuff we're going to get here. And
Yeah.
nobody really understood what to do with it all, first of all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there was a lot of it. But here we are at this juncture, I don't know, 15 years later, whatever it is. And we're finally starting to be able to harness this stuff
Yeah.
in ways that weren't even conceivable a couple of years ago. I mean, you couldn't even think in these terms 2 years
No. No, and I mean the way that the way that AI has allowed us to make good use of unstructured data is huge in terms of being able to take insight and for companies to take insight from what was previously, incredibly valuable data in terms of what customers were trying to tell them, or depending on the industry, whether it's guests or patients, or that there's just reams of unstructured data that we hadn't been able to do anything with previously. But actually, AI has done an amazing job in helping companies to be able to take insight from that data.
I'm looking forward to watching my colleagues in the loyalty space kind of enter this new age of, we can basically break down all the channels we've been looking through
Yeah.
because the data doesn't require channels anymore. I mean, you don't
Yes.
have to pull it that way. So
Yes.
that'll
Yes.
be really interesting.
Yeah.
See, we did it again.
I know.
We didn't even get through fully one more
two,
territory
two,
here.
two trends, I think.
And there's so much more here. I've had several conversations on this kind of broad topic recently, and it's another one of these areas where, the mind explodes. It just goes. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read the little caption that your
Yeah.
team has produced here,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
to set this up a little bit.
Let's do it.
Unleashing Zero UI, how will life change when screens stop mediating our experiences? The era of Zero UI is upon us. The series of screens and interfaces that we interact with daily will fade as technology integrates so seamlessly with life. Driven by biometrics, AI, and multimodal systems, this paradigm shift redefines our user experiences, turning payments, access, and services into intuitive, touchless, natural language-driven interactions. Wait a minute. I'm not going to have a screen? What am I going to carry around with me for security, you know?
It's I think that this is one of my favorite trends actually, because I think that you'll feel free. I think that you'll feel freer than you would have ever imagined. And I think you'll still have a screen. You just might not have a website on it, or like an app in the form that you are used to right now, that is kind of with the same UX patterns that we have right now across all of the mobile apps that we're used to. So I think that this is about being able to um, move away from the current kind of patterns that we have right now that are linked to websites and linked to mobile applications that are, sometimes actually not always the best way to get things done. They're actually, not always the best thing to complete tasks, not always the best way to book a travel, or not always the best way to search for flights. And I think that the way that people have adopted these GPTs and the chat format, it has shown that people have been longing for something different from
Right.
a UI standpoint. And so we're also seeing new products being built, to try and make use of AI, and to try and create this kind of zero UI capability for us to be able to just do one thing at once too. So on one end we have this kind of these general purpose technologies, and then on the other end we have these kinds of products that are being created just for payments or just for getting up in the morning, or, I think we'll see more of that too. So I think that we will see a move away from this kind of use of the website and the mobile app as the primary way of you engaging with a brand or an organization, towards something that is more that is freer, and doesn't have the same kind of UI restrictions that we have right now. And I think what some of the other examples are like, digital IDs being verified through biometrics, so people don't need to carry their phone with them. Or the University of Tokyo researchers, they're using touchless blood pressure screening tech that uses data collected from a video call or a smartphone app.
No
So
kidding.
yeah, so we're using there'll be ways for us to be able to gather data without you necessarily having to like download an app and type something in or complete a box, or for you to be able to engage with a particular service or product.
It's interesting to think about this paradigm shift, and the tensions it will create for brands and marketers and probably consumers as they,
Yeah,
adapt. But yeah, I'm already seeing, I'm already part of conversations with some of these companies
yeah,
that are saying, well, look, we've invested, whatever, $500,000 in our website, another
yeah,
couple $100,000 in the apps,
yeah,
and to drive people to, towards that kind of engagement. And
yeah,
yet, um, consumers are kind of cohort by cohort shifting at different paces into these new modes, and they're leaving some of this stuff behind. And I can,
yeah,
just recently, as in yesterday, was in a conversation with a group of people who I would consider to be extremely sharp when it
yeah,
comes to engaging with customers and how to do it well.
yeah.
And they are struggling with, you know, ChatGPT is now becoming kind of the go-to oracle, if you will,
Hmm.
um, which bypasses all these other mechanisms that they've spent so much time and money putting together.
Yeah, and I think what we're going to see is brands will need to find new ways to tell their customers about who they are, and to attract new customers and to retain their customers as well. And um, they're going to have to think about it and take action, and they're going to have to be open to the idea of things like geo, which is kind of the version of SEO where you optimize large language models to have a specific version of your brand that you want to have presented to your customers. When they're using one of these GPTs, or one of the large language models, that they are getting a version of the brand that you are trying to sell to them, or that you are trying to have them learn about you. The other thing that I think that brands are going to need to do is they're going to need to find other places to engage with their customers. So they're going to need to meet them in places where their customers are. So whether it is going into places like Roblox and creating interactions there, maybe they're making forays into AR and VR experiences, and starting to create branded experiences there, instead of just relying on branded experiences through the websites and mobile apps. Or maybe they're thinking about creating their own physical products for particular that are branded experiences as well. That is the next version of we're in the agentic AI age, but then physical AI is coming as well. So I think that we'll see, there's the possibility to see that companies will start to build these branded experiences through physical products as well, and that will become a way that people learn about brands too. So, brands are going to have to open themselves up to going to different places to have their customers learn about them now, and to share that branded message, and to deliver their services and experiences too.
Um, yeah, we're in danger of me getting on a soapbox and talking about.
Oh, go for
Yeah,
it.
I don't. That's nobody likes it when I do that, but you know, for no, I'm not even going to do it. I'm
Uh,
just not. I'm not going to take the bait.
no, no, I know. No, I'm like, are you for or against what I said?
No, I'm very much for it. I'm very
Okay.
much for it. But I think what it points to, all right, you know what? I'm going to give you the light version of a very long
Do
rant,
like a 2 minute soapbox.
if I can. That's the hard part. Um, websites showed up, SEO happened,
Yeah,
and brands were really quick to go, wait a second, I can appear everywhere in this particular kind of modality in front of
yeah,
anybody I want. And I can look at metrics that tell me how I think how people are viewing me,
yeah,
and walked away from, in the process, genuine engagement, human to human engagement, or understanding somebody on that really individual level. It was just
yeah,
too easy to look at the metrics, at my
yeah.
analytics, and engagement kind of dropped away. What I think I'm hearing you say and
Mhm.
interpreting for the future of this is that um, AI, agentic AI, product AI at some point will certainly force brands to rethink the channels that have now become so easy,
Yep,
the kind of game,
yep,
and reflect on how to better engage with the people who
yeah.
actually spend the money rather than just look at metrics.
Yeah, they're going to have to go. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is so interesting too because, right, like I'm all about like my background is as a service designer and I'm all about like the amount of investment that goes into customer facing channels being matched with the way that the organization is enabled to deliver upon that investment. And so I think that this is I think this is really interesting development in terms of being able to shift potentially brand differentiation back to service delivery. So, there's a potential that actually, if you might be disintermediated from your customers and the way that you end up differentiating is how your service is delivered rather than how you show up on a website or a mobile app from a branding standpoint. So then do you invest all your money in making sure that your operations and that your customer support and that all the machinations of your organization are actually the things that are the most important because that's how you are going to differentiate is through the amazing service experience that you deliver that actually doesn't show up through UI or an app. It actually just shows up through the experience that is the service that experience. So I mean that is a potential future as well, I think, and a potential area where brands can differentiate themselves in the future that they are disintermediated from their customers by agents or them not going to a website or a mobile app.
I think that's a beautiful can of worms that I can't wait to get into. Really, because it's it points towards what so many people that I get to interact with are really passionate about, and as
Yeah,
delivering great experiences, but in all the definitions of that
yeah,
as the true differentiators. And I just don't
yeah,
think anybody's really seen it through the service design lens and what
yeah.
AI can actually kind of bring back that we've lost.
Yeah, it creates a huge opportunity for the organizations that can get that service delivery experience right. And then also other opportunities for brands to think about where their customers are and how they can show up there in a more interesting, engaging way. Um, yeah, it's interesting. How did I say before? It's interesting times.
Yeah, it's really interesting times. And I think, see that I blew past your time, your allotted
Yeah.
time here.
Oh,
I
that's all right.
couldn't help it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to wrap up this conversation because that just seems like a big miss. There's so much more to talk about here. And if you can't tell, we're having a great time talking to each other. There's the exchange of ideas, for me, is unique. and I think that has a lot to do with who Jess is as a human, but also like you lead an organization that is all about creating big thoughts and bringing them to life in big scales. So I want to do this again, but unfortunately, we have schedules to keep. So
Yeah.
Jess Leitch is head of Frog in North America. We were talking about their report called Futurescape. There will be links to everything you need below this episode. Jess, thanks.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.